today's video, I love The Wizard of Oz. It was one of my favourite childhood movies and still is. But unfortunately, my childhood has been slightly shattered with just the craziness that was the liability of the Wizard of Oz set. And I thought it'd be really interesting to share this with you guys. Some of the facts are just interesting of like how things were made, and others were just like, oh my gosh, how did no one think that was a bad idea? So it definitely paved the way for movies to come, that's for sure. And I'm really excited to share with you. Do you like? Oh, sorry, that was the joke. Yeah, I'm a different kind of Dorothy. She went to a different Oz, that's for sure. And sorry about the background as well. I wanted it to be a really fun, like, emerald green Oz for like the Wizard of Oz, but I just couldn't get a nice shade of green that looked like relaxing and calming. So just imagine a lovely like emerald city background for me. It is what it is what it is, and that's just what it is, you know. But without further ado, let me read some of these really fun facts for you. Right. So when I tell you these actors suffered for their art, like they suffered for their art, like textbook definition of art suffering right here. But before we get into that, let me just give you some backstory on The Wizard of Oz. So The Wizard of Oz was adapted from L. Frank Baum's book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, which was published on the 17th of May in the year 1900, so well old. The Wizard of Oz took about 6 months to film. The principal photography began on the 13th of October 1938 and wrapped up on the 16th of March 1939, and then the film was released in August of 1939. Now, I didn't know this, but before this 1939 movie, the iconic Wizard of Oz, there was a silent movie that came out called The Wizard of Oz that came out in the year 1925. And they've had many different adaptations prior to our Wizard of Oz that we're talking about, and many since. So, it did have 6 Oscar nominations, and only won 2. One for Best Original Score, and the other for Best Original Song. And then Judy Garland also won like an Oscar, but in the it's called the Juvenile Award for, I guess, young actors, but that award no longer exists at the Oscars. So, bummer. I want to start off with the conspiracy theory. Let's get that right out of the way right here, right now. So there's a common theory conspiracy surrounding The Wizard of Oz that involves a shadowy figure seen in the back of the scene where Dorothy and her friends were singing "We're Off to See the Wizard." I believe it's when they've just, when they're throwing the apples. That's the Tin Man scene, I believe. And the witch comes out and does all that witchy stuff, and then as they turn around to sing, there's a shadowy figure in the background amongst all the trees. So as they sing "We're Off to See the Wizard," but many people started speculating that that shadow was one of the actors that played a Munchkin who tragically took their own life. However, that mystery behind the shadow has been clarified. It was actually a bird that was added in the scene to bring more life and movement to the background. And I think like you can hear bird noises and actually see birds in the background, but you don't really pay attention to it. But it is pretty creepy looking, but it's not. So let's get that right out of the way, right here, right now. Okay, no spreading misinformation here. So in the slippers because she wore a couple of different pairs throughout the filming. Well, one of the pairs was stolen from the Judy Garland Museum in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. They went missing by someone who, still to this day, I don't believe they actually found out who stole them. But after more than a decade, the slippers were finally recovered back in 2018, and then they were recently sold at auction at around $28 million. But again, like, I don't think, I tried to find it, but I couldn't find it on the internet who stole the shoes. The song Over the Rainbow almost didn't make it into the film, which is one of the most beloved movie songs like ever. They almost cut it because they thought it was going to be too long and slow for the younger audiences, which, to be fair, as a child I didn't really pay attention to it, but I can enjoy it now as an adult. Then there was another scene that actually was cut. So there was a scene where something called the jitterbug, it was like going to be like a musical number, where Dorothy and her friends are attacked by a jitterbug dancers sent by the Wicked Witch, but the scene was removed. So the Tin Man's tears were actually chocolate syrup. The filmmakers chose this because it was provided a more striking visual for the scene, as machine oil wouldn't have shown up as clearly on camera. And then this one I thought was so cute. Adriana Casalotti, who is the voice of Snow White, the original Snow White, had a small little uncredited cameo in The Wizard of Oz. She sang, you know, with the Tin Man. Not the Tin Man. Wait, who's the one that sings If I Only Had a Heart? That's the Tin Man. Yeah, he sings If I Only Had a Heart. And then the line, Wherefore art thou, Romeo? That's her. She's the voice of Julia. And she was paid $1,000 for that one line. The set of The Wizard of Oz was infamous for the sweltering heat caused by the early Technicolor process, which required intense lighting. On top of that, a lot of the actors were wearing really heavy costumes and makeup, which added to the temperatures ending up being over 100 degrees. The heat was so extreme that actors would often faint and have to be carried off set. At times, the director, Victor Fleming, had to turn off the lights and open the studio doors just to give the cast a chance to cool down. So, Toto was actually played by a female dog called Terry. But poor Toto was injured during filming when one of the actors who played one of the Wicked Witch's soldiers accidentally jumped on her. Terry ended up spraining her foot, and they had to bring in a doggy double for the short time while Terry recovered. Luckily, Terry did make a quick recovery and returned to set just a few weeks later. Terry was paid around $125 a week for her work, which ended up being around $2,800. The Wizard of Oz initially struggled at the box office, failing to recoup its production costs, until its re-release 10 years later in 1949. Released in 1939, the film earned around $3 million, but it was, with high production costs, it resulted in a huge loss for the studio. At the time, The Wizard of Oz was Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer's most expensive production, with a budget of around $2.7 to $2.8 million. The film faced stiff competition with the film Gone with the Wind, which was released that same year. If you want me to do a video on all of the behind the scenes of Gone with the Wind, please let me know, because that's another one that was like, oh, I have a lot of thoughts on that movie, I'm telling you right now. So with Gone with the Wind being stiff competition, the filmmakers, I need a coffee. The filmmakers chose the pink gingham pattern because they believed it would be better translated to the big screen using their Technicolor process, which was still relatively new at the time. So, asbestos in the film. During the 1930s, asbestos was commonly used for its heat-resistant properties and versatility, and it was even incorporated into filmmaking. In fact, it was used in several classic movies to create the effect like fake snow, long before its harmful effects were known. For The Wizard of Oz, the crew created snow for the poppy fields. Yeah, that made sense. Snow in the poppy field scene by spraying a type of asbestos over the set. Additionally, the Scarecrow's costume and the Wicked Witch's broom were treated with asbestos to make them flame resistant. Ray Bolger, who played the Scarecrow, stuffed his costume with asbestos to protect him during scenes involving fire. Tragically, neither the cast nor the crew nor countless industrial workers of that era were aware of the longer-term health risks associated with asbestos exposure, which would later prove to be deadly. Asbestos fibers, when inhaled, can cause serious health issues such as lung disease, lung cancer, and even more rare and aggressive types of cancer. I remember my grandparents had asbestos in their doors. It was there was a layer of asbestos in between their doors, but it was sealed shut. But I was always really scared that I was gonna get sick from the asbestos. Maybe I will. Maybe I have already inhaled it. Who knows? But poor Judy Garland, lying on the floor with just asbestos raining down on her. So, Gail Sundergaard was originally considered for the role of the Wicked Witch of the West. However, she turned it down after the character's persona was changed from a more glamorous type witch to the iconic ugly hag type role. But I bet she was bullet dodged after all the craziness that came out from the poor Wicked Witch. She went through it, you guys. So Margaret Hamilton, who played the iconic Wicked Witch of the West, faced some insane, serious challenges during filming. One of the most significant issues was the bright green makeup she wore for the role, which was made up from copper-based compounds. This makeup was toxic, and because of it, she couldn't ingest because it was so toxic. So there were some articles that I found that said that she'd have to go on a very strict liquid diet so that no makeup she'd accidentally swallow. But apparently she couldn't eat any solid foods to avoid risk of ingestion because of just how harmful the makeup was. Aside from it being toxic, it was also highly flammable, and during one of the scenes in which the Wicked Witch makes her dramatic exit from Munchkin land in a burst of smoke and fire, things went horribly wrong. A fire effect was triggered too early, and Hamilton was caught in the flames. The fire caused serious burns to her face, including her chin, nose, and cheek. She also suffered burns on her hands, which required weeks of recovery. Despite the severity of her injuries, she did return to filming after healing. However, instead of using the makeup on her hands, she wore special effect malfunctioned and caused flames to engulf Dunker. The explosion from the broomstick sent flames towards her, burning her costume and leaving her injured. She was taken to hospital and spent 11 days recovering from her injuries. Despite all the risks involved and just the fact that she generally was injured, she only received $35 for her work on the day, which was far less than Toto ever got, highlighting the difference in compensation, which is crazy. Like in my pirate video, when a pirate would get injured, they'd get workers' compensation, and on the set of The Wizard of Oz, she wouldn't get workers' compensation. Like, the pirates were better at workers' compensation than an iconic film. Crazy. For the Emerald City horses, they didn't want to use real paint for the horses, so instead they'd get white horses and then they'd use jello powder to dye them the different colours, because there's a couple of different colours that the horses are, and it was several different horses, and they just take sponges and they just on the horses, yeah, just like that. Judy Garland was the actor who played Dorothy in the movie, but she faced a huge amount of challenges during the production of the film, many of which fueled by the intense pressure placed on her by the studio, the director, and even fellow cast members. Supposedly, these pressures had a long-lasting effect on Garland's personal life, mental health, and career. At just 16 years old, Judy Garland was cast as the lead in The Wizard of Oz, but instead of being nurtured at a young age, she was treated like a commodity to be shaped into the idolized version of femininity. The studio was particularly focused on her weight and her youthful appearance, which they believed was essential to her success. However, they took extreme measures to ensure she fit their image. To maintain her slim, youthful figure, Judy was subjected to a strict and often unhealthy diet. She was placed on a rigid eating regime that was designed to keep her thin and maintain the appearance of young, innocent girl. The studio was so concerned about her figure that they didn't want her to have a developing body. There are reports that suggest they tried to keep her from gaining any weight at all, particularly around her breasts, as they wanted her to look younger than her age. The studio believed it would make her more marketable and more appealing to the audiences. She was prescribed various medications to help her maintain the required appearance, along with her energy levels. She was given a combination of pills to suppress her appetite and keep her awake during shoots, and help her stay energized when she was exhausted. According to reports, Garland was prescribed pep pills, which were essentially just sleeping pills to counteract the effects of stimulants. This combination was meant to keep her thin and alert while filming, but it had devastating lasting impacts on her health. Over time, Garland became dependent on these pills. The constant cycle of these helped to suppress her appetite, and sleeping pills to help her rest took such toll on her physical and mental well-being. She was reportedly often hungry and drained from exhaustion from the pills and the rigorous work schedule. The effect of the diet and medication was so long-lasting that led to a lifelong battle of addiction. And then to add on top of that, Victor Fleming, who was the and so I was a bit unsure whether to put it in or not. There's nothing more frustrating when I do my research and I find like completely different accounts in every different article, and then I'm like, which one is it? So again, like, it's hard to tell. A lot of it is just hearsay, I guess. In later years, Garland opened up and discussed the cruel treatment she received from the studio and the director, as well as her fellow actors. She described how the pills and the dieting contributed to her physical and emotional turmoil, as well as all the pressures she faced to maintain her youthful image. Garland's story was one of a young girl who was pushed to the brink of her limits, all in the name of perfection. I'd really love to do a video just on Judy Garland specifically, because I think her life is so sad, but I think there's so much there. I mean, she was so talented. So if you're interested in that, please let me know. The Cowardly Lion's costume was made from real lion hair. Before synthetic fur was available, the only way to truly create an authentic-looking lion costume was by using real lion hair. To ensure continuity, actor Burt Law, who played the Cowardly Lion, wore the same costume throughout most of the filming. However, the costume was incredibly heavy, weighing about 90 pounds, and combined with the intense heat from the Technicolor lights on set, it made filming extremely uncomfortable. One of the cinematographers, Harold Rosen, even recalled that the heat from the light caused many of the actors to faint or be carried off set, as I said. Now, Law in particular sweated heavily in his lion costume. The costume absorbed so much sweat each day that it had to be placed in an industrial drying bin each night to be dried out. Given its weight and Law's extreme discomfort, he had to remove the costume completely after every shot to cool off. Despite the challenges, Law persevered in his role, and the costume became an iconic part of The Wizard of Oz. In 2014, the Cowardly Lion costume was auctioned off for an astonishing $3 million. I find the costume so creepy looking. I think that's one of the creepiest parts of the film for me. Like, he's creepy as. Is that just me? Buddy Ebsen, who originally was cast as the Tin Man, faced terrifying health issues due to the makeup he wore for the role. During rehearsal, Ebsen began to experience severe cramping in his hands, arms, and legs, and struggled to breathe. His wife rushed him to the hospital, where he was placed in an oxygen tent for 2 weeks. The cause of his condition was the aluminium-based makeup, which caused him to ingest harmful particles into his lungs. Despite the seriousness of his health issues, the studio was not sympathetic. Ebsen recalled that the studio urged him to return to work immediately. However, with his skin turning blue, with his health severely impacted, production decided to replace him with Jack Haley. The makeup was altered to a less toxic formula for Haley, but it still caused Haley to develop a painful eye infection. Sadly for Ebsen, he reported having breathing issues Interestingly, Ray Bolger was originally cast as the Tin Man, and I read that Buddy Ebsen, who played the Tin Man, was originally the Scarecrow, but apparently they swapped. Now, it's conflicted. If some say that Ray wanted to be the Scarecrow, which is why they switched, and others say that he was persuaded to be the Scarecrow, which is why they switched. Either way, Ray dodged. I mean, he didn't come out unscathed, but he still dodged a major bullet, crazy. I mean, that sounds so terrible to say. Between the two, do you want just face scarring or not being able to breathe anymore? I mean, that's insane. That's what it comes down to on this filming set. So, the Munchkins were remembered fondly for their role in The Wizard of Oz, but behind the scenes, their experience was far less than glamorous. The actors were paid considerably less than the film's major stars, despite their pivotal role they played in the film. The Munchkins received significantly lower pay, while Judy Garland, the film star, earned around $500 per week, which was a decent sum for her time. Many of the Munchkin actors were paid only $50 per week, a small amount by the standards of the time. This would roughly be around $1,000 per week today, which is still a fraction of what the other cast members made. The pay disparity was even more pronounced given the actors who played the Munchkins' long working hours, which often stretched for 6 days a week. In addition to being underpaid, many of the actors were subjected to mistreatment and harsh working conditions. The actors were reportedly confined to their dressing rooms when they weren't needed on set, with limited access to food and rest. Some sources suggest that the actors who played the Munchkins were not given the same privileges as the other actors. There are accounts of them being told they could not eat in the MGM cafeteria with the rest of the cast. There are also stories of the Munchkin actors being treated like a novelty, almost as if they were part of a circus act rather than serious performers. They were often referred to as derogatory names rather than their actual names, and their role was seen as more of a spectacle rather than an essential part of the film. This added to a power imbalance between the actors who played the Munchkins in comparison to the other cast members. So this is where it gets accounts vary. There were reports of a controversial incident that had been discussed over the years, which involved some of the actors who played the Munchkins reportedly drinking heavily on set, which led to disruptive behaviour. It's said that some of the actors would show up drunk to film their scenes, which caused delays in production. While this behaviour can partially be explained by the stressful working conditions and the mistreatment they faced, because honestly, if I was treated that way, I'd be drinking too. It also led to negative stories about the actors who played the Munchkins' professionalism. However, it's important to note that these stories are not agreed upon, and some of the actors themselves have denied or downplayed these allegations. They were often forced into physically uncomfortable costumes, which made long hours of filming even more challenging. The small size of their costumes and the elaborate makeup process took a toll on their bodies, and many of the Munchkin actors complained about the discomfort during their time on set. The extensive